It's April 30th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dam. We begin with the stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with U.S. President Donald Trump's first 100 days back in the Oval Office. 100 days in, Trump went on a parade of his proudest accomplishments of the past 3 months. Also, ahead of a rally in Michigan, he decided to relax some of his 25% tariffs on autos and auto parts after industry pushback. The People Power Party contenders for the June presidential election are now cut down to 2. Former Labor Minister Kim Moon-soo and former PPP leader Han Dong-hoon. The Democratic Party will launch its election campaign committee on Wednesday. South Korea's industrial output edged up in March from the month before on the back of strong semiconductor production, but retail sales and facility investment remained sluggish. The U.S. will temporarily ease tariffs on auto parts for 2 years, giving car makers time to transition to producing cars in the country. The Trump administration also said that Seoul is in pursuit of a deal framework before the June presidential election, now only for the claim to be denied by South Korean officials. Our Park Hyo-bin starts us off.
The U.S. government has decided to ease the tariff burden on auto industry for 2 years. President Donald Trump signed an order Tuesday to temporarily ease tariff on auto parts for companies that manufacture cars in the U.S. The move came after the Trump administration began imposing 25% tariff on fully built vehicles, which took effect on April 3rd. Tariffs on auto parts are set to be implemented in stages on May 3rd. The new measure provides a tariff offset for parts in U.S. assembled vehicles equaling 3.75% of the retail price in the first year and 2.5% in the second year. These percentages correspond to a 25% tariff applied to 15% of the vehicle's value in the first year and 10% in the second year. Trump said the measure is meant to give automakers time to produce cars in the U.S.
We just wanted to help them during this little transition, short term. And during this little, if they can't get parts, it has to do with a very small percentage. If they can't get parts, we didn't want to penalize them.
Meanwhile, U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said Tuesday that tariff talks with South Korea are beginning to take shape, although he did not provide further details.
I can see the contours of a deal with the Republic of Korea coming together, and then we've had substantial talks with the Japanese.
When asked how domestic issues in South Korea and other trade partners are affecting trade talks, Bessent stated that these countries want to have a framework of a deal in place before their elections. However, Seoul's finance ministry rejected the remarks and reaffirmed that the country is committed to following a proper procedures and not rushing the negotiations. U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick told CNBC on Tuesday that he had reached a deal with one country that should permanently ease the reciprocal tariffs Trump plans to impose. Lutnick declined to name the country, saying the deal was awaiting local approval. Based on remarks from U.S. officials, India is seen as the country closest to reaching a deal on tariffs. Bessent said in a briefing that 2 countries are very close to a breakthrough. Park Hyo-bin, Arirang News.
And today marks Trump's first 100 days as the President of the United States. And he spent the day touting his accomplishments, from reshaping the federal government to his immigration crackdown. We connect with Chris Casquejo over in the U.S. for more. Hello there, Chris.
Good to be with you.
So, Chris, certainly a big day for himself, but how did Trump celebrate his 100th day back in the Oval Office? Walk us through the day.
Right. Well, he just wrapped up a visit to the state of Michigan, the battleground state of Michigan, a Detroit suburb called Warren, Michigan, where he gave a speech at a rally before a crowd of 4,000 people at Macomb Community College. And on the stage, he leaned heavily into his signature themes. It actually felt like a campaign speech, and Trump at one point said that he missed the campaign, leaning heavily into his border enforcement, economic pride, and his America First themes. He actually showed a video of gang members, supposed gang members that have been deported to that controversial prison in El Salvador. Now, he also used the moment, as you mentioned, to talk about his pause on auto tariffs, which we'll get into more later. And earlier in the day, he visited Selfridge Air National Guard Base, where he, along with Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer, announced that there would be a plan to send 21 new F-15EX fighter jets to the site, replacing some of the older jets that were scheduled to go out of service at this very important Air National Guard base in suburban Detroit, Michigan. But there was no formal celebration at the White House, we should note.
Well, like I said, this is his second time celebrating his 100 days in the Oval Office. And the past 100 days were sharply different from the same period of his first term, weren't they?
Right. And I think you have to think of Trump's 100 days this time around when you mention all these things, but definitely talk about all the executive orders, close to 140 of them, which is more than double the rate of executive orders in his first term, and the wide latitude he's given Elon Musk to cut the federal government, with the Department of Government Efficiency and DOGE. So DOGE has made steep cuts across federal agencies, including the closure of the Department of Education, and a couple of 100,000 federal workers are now looking for new jobs. Now, while Trump's first term was dominated by rallies and a lot of back and forth with the media, he's kept a much lower profile. He's been at his Mar-a-Lago estate 12 of the past 14 weekends, and he also, but he did make the trip this past weekend to attend Pope Francis's funeral with other world leaders.
Right. Well, Chris, we have to talk about Trump's approval rating. Just last week, that reached the lowest for any newly elected president after 100 days, something Trump called fake news. Has he managed to overturn that poor rating over the past week?
No, we haven't seen any bounce in the polls. His approval rating sits at 40% with 59% disapproval. And again, that's the lowest 100-day mark for a U.S. president in decades. Among independents, his support continues to erode, and he dismissed, as you said, these polls as fake news. But the divide is really deep here. His base is still with him, but the broader electorate remains really concerned about high prices and inflation. So the economy is a big issue, and immigration is a big issue. Right. On the economy, his approval is down to 37%. And voters are getting frustrated with rising prices and the uncertainty, which caused world markets to roil around tariffs. On immigration, only 34% approve of his approach, while 48% say it goes too far. Now, among Hispanic voters, support has fallen sharply from 46% in 2024 to just 34% now.
Chris, let's go back to the auto tariffs being adjusted on this 100th day. Now, Trump said he decided to soften auto tariffs, which will be a big relief for that specific industry. But we did see this coming, right?
Yeah, the important thing to note here is there are not going to be stacked tariffs on U.S. autos. Automakers already pay an auto tariff will not pay extra tariffs on steel and aluminum. U.S. car makers who build domestically get a temporary rebate, 3.75% of the vehicle's value this year and 2.5% next year. Now, this came after intense pressure from the Michigan automakers and labor unions who warned that tens of thousands of jobs were at risk. And that may be why Trump chose to spend the end of his 100th day in office in that battleground state of Michigan. Now, this move is being framed as economic support by the administration, but many also see it as damage control, to pivot, this pivot to calm the growing unrest among those labor unions, and those auto workers in states like Michigan.
Right. Chris, before I let you go, Representative Sri Thanadar on Monday filed articles of impeachment against President Trump. Now, this is the first time this year a House Democrats try to impeach the leader or even a member of his administration, right?
Yeah, this is a second-term Michigan congressman who's a Democrat, Sri Thanadar, and he says Trump has abused his power and undermined democratic norms. But let's be real, it stands no chance of advancing in the Republican-controlled House and Senate, and it's largely symbolic. But it shows that there is growing discontent, and on the Democratic side, for sure, especially with Trump's moves on immigration. There's that immigrant Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was sent in an administrative error. The administration admits to that prison in El Salvador, and Democratic Congress people have been going to visit him to make sure he's okay. And then also, whether any Republicans will step forward if the economic storm continues to brew around the uncertainty around tariffs. Will more Republican congressmen step forward to say, hey, President Trump, these tariffs aren't a good idea. Maybe we should pause or back off a little. But so far, there has been little sign of that. Republicans are plowing forward on their plans to put some of Trump's budget cuts into action and into law.
Right. It's going to be a little push to challenge Trump, but definitely, like you said, symbolic. Chris, it was good to see you again. Thank you so much for connecting with us.
Yeah, you too. See you soon.
Also, in other news, Donald Trump Jr., the eldest son of U.S. President Donald Trump, will hold private meetings with heads of major South Korean conglomerates on Wednesday. While most of the meetings will be one-on-one, some group sessions are also on the agenda, with Trump Jr. expected to meet with roughly 20 business leaders. The invitation for the two-day trip in South Korea was facilitated by Shinsegae Group Chairman Chung Yong-jin, with whom Trump Jr. is known to have a close relationship. The visit is also drawing significant attention as it comes amid intensifying trade pressure from the U.S. government. But according to reports, Trump Jr. does not have any public meetings scheduled with South Korean politicians or government officials. South Korea's industrial output rose in March, while consumption and investment declined. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday, overall production increased 0.9% on month. Now, the gain was due to higher output in chips and pharmaceuticals, offsetting a decline in services. Retail sales fell 0.3% due to lower demand for mobile devices, computers, and passenger cars. Facility investment also dipped 0.9% as spending on agriculture and construction-related machinery fell. Now on to the run-up to the June presidential election. Having finalized its presidential candidate, the Democratic Party is now set to launch its election campaign committee on Wednesday today, with members from various factions, regardless of their political background. Our correspondent Sinang reports.
With 5 weeks left until the presidential election, the Democratic Party, having officially confirmed former leader Lee Jae-myung as its presidential candidate, is now putting together its election campaign committee. With plans to launch the committee on Wednesday, the party aims to form it with a focus on unity.
A true Republic of Korea is a community that comes together through greater unity and cooperation. That's what we need to build. Starting tomorrow, the DP will shift into campaign mode and focus all its efforts on winning the presidential election.
He has been taking steps to emphasize unity and broaden his appeal to centrist and conservative voters, mentioning the word unity 14 times in his acceptance speech on Sunday. The party said the committee will include members from various factions regardless of their political background. It has already shown such an intention by recruiting former Environment Minister Yoon Yeo-jun, known as a conservative strategist, to one of the top posts in the campaign. The party is also open to bringing in more centrist and conservative figures from across the political spectrum. Lee is reportedly planning to meet with his primary rivals, Kim Kyung-soo, former Gyeongsangnam-do Province Governor, and Kim Dong-yeon, current Gyeonggi-do Province Governor. Kim Dong-yeon cannot officially join the committee because he is a sitting governor, but Kim Kyung-soo is expected to join if asked. Liberal figures outside East faction, such as former Prime Minister Chung Se-kyun and Kim Bu-kyum, are also being considered for the campaign committee. Kang Keum-sil, a former justice minister under the Nomuyan administration, is joining the campaign as the committee's chief chair. 신하영, Arirang News.
And the People Power Party is also nearing its own pick for the party's presidential candidate by narrowing it down to two contenders. They are former Labor Minister Kim Mun-soo and former PPP leader Han Dong-hoon. The two will face a runoff election with the results set to come out on Saturday. Our Kim Do-yeon reports.
It's now down to two, Kim Mun-soo and Han Dong-hoon. The People Power Party announced the winners of the second round of voting on Tuesday. The second round had been fierce, with no clear frontrunner from the 3 days of heated debates. But as the results were announced, they continued to emphasize party unity, as the Democratic Party of Korea's Lee Jae-myung, certainly not an easy opponent, awaits in the presidential election.
I'm also grateful to Han Dong-hoon for joining me in the final stage of the primary. I believe he has a bright future ahead, and I look forward to seeing him play a major role for the good of our country.
In this challenging presidential race, there are differences between Kim Mun-soo and I, but that's exactly why we must team up, like a three-legged race, and stand as one against Lee Jae-myung.
The results follow voting on Sunday and Monday under the same rules as the second round, 50% PPP members and 50% an open survey. Neither candidate secured over 50% of the total tally, leading to a runoff, proving the tightness of the race. A one-on-one debate will be held on Wednesday, followed by voting, with the final result announced on Saturday at the party's presidential race convention. Meanwhile, An Chul-soo, in his exit speech, pledged to support the winner of the race.
We must work harder to overcome the crisis facing our party. Whoever wins, I'll give my all to stop Lee Jae-myung and bring about a change in government.
Hong Jun-pyo, as he said before, declared his retirement from politics, a 30-year career with 5 terms at the parliament and 2 gubernatorial posts.
I will return to private life and live quietly. My role in this presidential race ends here.
The race yet again is between one candidate who was against impeachment, Kim Mun-soo, and one pro-impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol, Han Dong-hoon. This translates to someone more appealing to conservative and traditional PPP members versus someone more appealing to moderate and undecided voters. In addition, Kim has been openly supporting the idea of acting President Han Duck-soo running for the presidency and merging camps, while Han has even called the party's support of this a defeatist mindset. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Commuters in Seoul face delays on Wednesday after unionized bus drivers launched a work-to-roll slowdown protest after last-minute wage talks broke down. This comes as Seoul Bus Labor Union and representatives from management held last-minute negotiation talks on Tuesday, which fell apart in the early hours of Wednesday morning after 9 hours of discussions. The union is demanding an 8.2% increase in base pay and an extension of the retirement age from 63 to 65. Management is pushing to lower the standard wage through a wage system reform. Despite the protest, both sides are expected to continue negotiations. This latest action falls short of the full-scale strike last year when wage talks also failed. Now, power is back on in Spain and Portugal after the European countries experienced the worst blackout in their history. Residents are returning to normal life, but authorities have yet to say what caused the blackouts. Ian Jin has more.
Power was restored to normal in Spain and Portugal by 11 a.m. on Tuesday local time after they experienced one of Europe's most severe blackouts. Despite the recovery, both Spain and Portugal remained in a state of emergency on Tuesday. A sudden loss of 15 gigawatts of power in a matter of 5 seconds around noon on Monday local time triggered the blackout, but authorities are yet to give an explanation into what caused this sudden loss of power.
When the power failure struck around noon on Monday, airports, railways, traffic, and hospitals were paralyzed, and phone services and ATMs were shut down. Emergency workers in Spain said they had rescued around 35,000 passengers on Monday, stranded along railways and the underground rail system. The Spanish National Electricity System operator had detected 2 incidents of power generation loss that could have caused the energy instability. And while the agency ruled out cyber attack as the cause, Spanish Prime Minister Sanchez said the government would not rush to conclusions in finding out what happened in those 5 seconds. 이은진, Arirang News.
Now we take a look at some of the stories from around the world with our Choi Ji-hee. Good morning, Ji-hee.
Good morning, Tommy.
So Ji-hee, let's start with Canada's federal election results, and the Liberal Party claimed victory.
That's right. Prime Minister Mark Carney led Canada's Liberal Party to victory in an election dominated by the United States, the tension with the United States. On Monday local time, the Liberal Party secured governance for a 4th consecutive term. In his victory speech, Carney said his country would never yield to the United States.
America wants our land, our resources, our water, our country. Never. But these are not idle threats. President Trump is trying to break us so that America can own us. That will never ever happen.
Carney's campaign gained momentum amid rising tensions with U.S. President Donald Trump, who had imposed tariffs on Canadian goods and said he wanted to make Canada the 51st state of the U.S. In his victory speech, Carney emphasized Canada's independence and declared Canada will never be part of the U.S. in any way, shape, or form. The Liberals secured 169 seats in the House of Commons, falling just short of the 172 needed for a majority. This means the government will need support from smaller parties to stay in power. In Syria, over a dozen people were killed during sectarian clashes in a Druze suburb of Damascus between residents and Sunnis on Tuesday. According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, at least 14 people were killed in the predominantly Druze town of Juramana, including local Druze fighters and members of Syria's General Security Service. The violence was reportedly triggered by the circulation of an audio recording on social media, allegedly insulting the Prophet Muhammad and attributed to a Druze cleric. The cleric, Marwan Kiwan, denied responsibility for the recording. The incident highlights ongoing sectarian tensions in Syria following the ousting of President Bashar al-Assad by Islamist-led rebels in December 2024. The Syrian Interior Ministry launched an investigation into the origin of the audio recording and called for calm. In the United States, tech giant Amazon on Tuesday denied reports that it planned to display U.S. tariff costs on product listings following a backlash from the White House. The company refuted claims that it intended to show tariff-related costs on its main website. It clarified that while its discount platform Amazon Haul had internally considered listing import charges on certain products, the idea was never approved or implemented. Initial reports of such claims led to criticism from the White House, with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt describing the alleged plan as hostile and political, adding Amazon should have displayed cost increases caused by inflation during the previous administration.
It's the last day of April and we're heading straight into some early summer heat today. Unfortunately, this hot and dry weather is also increasing the risk of wildfires. Most of the country is now under a dry weather advisory, and the situation is more serious in the east of Gangwon-do province, Gyeongsang-puk Dokdo as well as Daegu, where dry weather warnings are in place. And be prepared for a larger temperature swing throughout the day. Daytime highs will push past 25 degrees in many parts of Korea this afternoon. So Seoul gets up to toasty 26 degrees. Chuncheon, Daegu, Daejeon, Gwangju will be getting up to 27 degrees under mostly clear skies with decent air quality. The good news is that we do have some rain on the way tomorrow, which should help to ease these dry conditions nationwide. The capital area could be seeing up to 50 millimeters, but there will not be as much rain for Gyeongsangdo provinces as we'd like. And do expect to have strong winds through the end of the week, with more rain expected in southern provinces on Saturday.
That is all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at 5 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.